I'm saying all these terrible, horrible things that I did in my life, because I'm not a victim. I don't want anybody to think I'm a victim. I don't know if you can take that soundbite and move it to the front, but I'm not a victim. I don't think I'm a victim at all. I mean, there were things that happened to me, but I was the genesis for a lot of the things that happened in my life. The bad choices that I made hurt a lot of people. It's on me.
Dave Bolger here, and welcome to Had I Known, conversations with interesting members of the Hamilton College community. This week's guest is Wally Bressler, class of 1990. All right. I want to welcome in those of you who are new listeners to Had I Known. I'm noticing an uptick in new listeners, so welcome. And I can thank the Had I Known team on the ground in Clinton for some of these new listeners. They've been hard at work getting the word out about Had I Known, and they're doing a heck of a job. Maybe you were walking around on campus this weekend for fall coming / family weekend / whatever. Fall weekend, I think, right? All the things. Well, maybe you saw the snazzy Had I Known posters around campus. That's thanks to the Had I Known team there in Clinton. Well, if you saw those and decided to check this out, hopefully you're not regretting it so far. I didn't make it up to campus for fall weekend. I know many alums did go. I had my own mini reunion last weekend. Got to go on a fishing trip up to northern New Hampshire with Matt Hyduke, Jeff Kenoyer, and Eric Pizek, all members of the class of 99 and good friends of mine. Lots of Hamilton talk, lots of Had I Known talk. I learned that Eric Pizek, not a listener. So he won't even know I'm talking about him because maybe he's not going to listen to this. But it was a good trip. And if the alumni magazine still printed class notes, we have a classic 4 middle-aged men in waders with fishing poles photo to put in the class notes. But alas, as I look at the most recent issue of Hamilton magazine, and I flip to the back, no class notes. But what I did notice is it's a who's who of Had I Known guests. Right there on page 4, Sarah Damaski and her new book. The following page, Michael Breslin. A few pages later, there's, of course, the letter from former guest David Whitman, but he's the president, so I think he's always in there. Then the next page, Ron Kim, class of 2002, had a great episode with us. And then later on, of course, there's an article about Professor Dan Chambliss and a picture of him and former guest John Werner. They're, as you know from listening to the show, linked. And if you don't know and haven't heard, well, if you want to read more, there's like a reading companion to the show. Check out some of those episodes. Lots of good ones. And this week's guest, if he's not featured in a future issue of Hamilton magazine, then there's something seriously wrong. Because what a story Wally Bressler has. I didn't know Wally before talking to him, didn't know much about his story. He came highly recommended as someone that I should talk to. And by the way, please keep those recommendations coming. I've gotten a lot of them recently, all great. I welcome all feedback, all recommendations, because they lead to conversations like this. As you'll hear, we start talking about Wally's experience at Hamilton and his career has ventured into real estate and ultimately where he is now, where he coaches others on how to have a successful career selling real estate. But through the course of this conversation, Wally opens up and is as raw and honest as I think anyone has ever been on this show. He opens up about many different struggles that he faced throughout essentially his entire adult life up until this point, and ultimately talks about how he's overcome those and is now charting a new path for himself. It's quite an incredible story. So have a listen. Here is Wally Bressler, class of 1990.
Yeah, Newton's a nice area. A lot of poor people live there. It's a shame. I don't know how they make it there. It's terrible. But I grew up in New Hampshire, Nashua, New Hampshire. So
Okay, all right.
I lived in Boston for about 8 years with, well, not all, but some with my Hamilton roommate Nate Osteen. But we ran into a bunch of people in from Hamilton down there, because Hamilton's got a pretty good presence down there. So,
yeah, absolutely. It's, I mean, New York, DC, or Boston, right? Those are the three popular destinations.
Much, right? Yeah, that's where most of the attorneys and the financial firms are. So
exactly right, exactly. And you're based in Dallas, or
just north of Dallas.
Okay.
My story's going to be pretty much the opposite of everybody else's story, unfortunately. So
no, that's good. That's good. That's what makes it interesting.
Most people went like this. I went like this, and then this. So, in fact, I'm just on this right now. So yeah, but I appreciate
that's good.
I'm excited about this.
Nice. So you mentioned your trajectory, and this is a Hamilton podcast. So how do you go from Nashua to Clinton?
It's a great question. I grew up in Nashua, New Hampshire. My high school football coach in Nashua, Ken, his son Jim, was one of the coaches at Hamilton. Okay. And so I was looking at other schools, and he said, you should take a look at Hamilton. I'm like, really? He said, yeah, really, really good school, great education there. And I wanted to be an English major at the time. And at the time, the English department was ranked pretty highly in the country, and Hamilton was ranked highly as well. And so, it didn't hurt that I was like 6'3", 250 pounds in high school either. That's always nice, right? So he encouraged me to take a look at it. I went up for a visit, really liked it. And then, Coach Frank, he was on me like a rat in a Cheeto, like he was, I'm sure, a lot of the other guys in my class. And I built a good relationship with him. I really liked it. And so, it ended up being my school of choice. And I got in, and I went there. So it was a great school.
Was playing college football part of the plan?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I did want to play college football. And it's funny, I didn't begin with me. I didn't start playing football until probably ninth grade, till high school. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason was, my mom was a teacher, and she had pretty exacting standards for school, and I didn't do so great for a while. So I didn't do so well for a while. So, but she said, if you get your grades up, you can play. So I started playing in ninth grade, and then I got better and better. And, I looked at a couple of Division I schools. I got a couple of walk-on invites. And there was one school that I was working on getting a scholarship to, but I decided that I wanted to leave the state. So I ended up going to Hamilton College.
And you mentioned your size, some bulk and some talent on that team. That was sort of the heyday of Hamilton football.
Yeah, we had a great time. We did really, really well.
What else did you get up to at Hamilton during your time there? Late 80s. What was it like in the late 80s there?
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, it was kind of the beginning of the end for the very flexible alcohol rules that were there. Mm-hmm. Right? It was pretty crazy. We
the days we would hear about as students in the late 90s, what it used to be like. Yeah,
like when you were hiding in your dorm, or if you were over in the dark side and you were stuck in your suite, and you guys all like built a wall up so nobody could hear you. But yeah, I mean, from that standpoint, it was interesting, because you walk outside, there'd be a keg in a snowbank, and they still bought the Matt's beer truck up on Ham Day, right? Mm-hmm. Or you'd leave at intermission for the hockey games, in between all the Zambonis there, and go out and drink beer or whatever, what I'm saying, or just, go have a huge cake party somewhere, and just do it with ease, and so that was definitely the beginning of the end. By the time I was a senior, I was an RA, and they were definitely putting the clamps down on that for sure. If you recall, it was I get there in 86. So apartheid was still, kind of tough. Yeah. At that point, there were a lot of sit-ins and things like that. And, the different parts of the school, and whatnot. Fraternities were still really strong there. They were still in their heyday as well too. There were, although I think our years were probably the beginning of the end there too, because there were some not so good things that happened at some of the fraternities that were there. Not so much that anybody didn't think bad to anybody else. Just you're in college, you make bad decisions as part of the growth process, right? So
right.
People know this. I think this one young woman decided to make a cocktail of champagne and Sudafed. That didn't go so well. Things like that. So, I guess you could thank our, the 4 years that we were there for probably, finishing off any of the good times that were there before. and the period before we were there was even crazier. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. You heard stories of guys in fraternities, running down, the fraternity row naked and stuff like that, and things like that, and just people just getting away with all kinds of stuff. So it progressively got more and more conservative, I guess you could say, with respect to what they were letting students do. Aside from not talking about partying, but the academics were still great. Lots of great professors on campus at that time. People who had been there for a long, long time too, right? So Sid Werdemer was still there when I was there.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of really good professors that had helped, not just build the college, but also build their departments as well,
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And you mentioned wanting to be an English major. What was the plan or the dream for after Hamilton?
Well, oddly enough, what you and I were talking about getting into advertising, and I really thought I wanted to get into advertising.
Okay.
And it's interesting because I really thought I wanted to get into architecture. First, we talked about that. You said your wife's an architect too.
Yeah.
But when I realized how much math was involved, I was pretty much done. My whole thing was that once they invited letters to the math dance, that was pretty much over for me. So anyway, so definitely a left brainer for sure. So I was I enjoyed writing. My mom was a school teacher. I wrote fairly well, and I want to get advertising. I thought that would be the best thing for me to do that. But I remember, if you recall, 1990 was the second worst year since World War II to graduate from college. We were just at the beginning of a double dip recession. Where the Gulf War was pretty much ramping up at that moment, the first Gulf War. So a weird place. And so I remember going to New York City for interviews, Gray, Saatchi and Saatchi, Ogilvy Mather, all those guys. And I sat and did interviews, and I didn't get a sniff, so it didn't work out that way. I mean, fortunately, I've been doing, I'm sure we'll talk about that later, but a lot of what I've done over my career, I've done a lot of copywriting. I've ghostwritten 3 books for people, and I've done a lot of direct response copywriting, white papers, websites, emails, and stuff like that. So that served me well, but I just did out of school. It really, didn't help me a whole lot.
So what'd you do after school?
Well, I was a substitute teacher at my old high school for the year because it was really hard to find a job. So I went and worked at the substitute teacher at my house. My mom taught there, and she was also the director of foreign languages for the school system. So I basically went and did that, and then I ended up getting a job at Putnam Investments in 1991.
Okay.
There were a few Hamilton folks that worked there, and so I ended up going down there and working there and lived in.
Okay.
Interesting, fun topic, fun fact. I think the last year of Hamilton when I graduated was $18,300 that year. And, my first year at Putnam I got paid $17,500. just for perspective. I ended up having to get a job as a bouncer and then a bartender down there to make ends meet until I could build myself up. Yeah, it was crazy.
Wow. And then, as I understand it, you did that for a while, but then decided to ultimately make a change in careers. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I worked in the mutual fund industry for quite a while, and it was interesting from 1991 to 1998. And I really, they had this great program at Putnam that if you recruited somebody to the company and they stayed 6 months, they would give you a check for $2,000. So I'm like, okay. So I recruited everybody I could. I brought as many Hamiltonians as I could there. Number one, because it was a great company to work for, but also, getting $2,000 every 6 months was pretty cool, or whatever period of time. So there were a lot of Hamiltonians that did come to work there afterwards, that I recruited there, which was really fun.
Interesting.
So in 1998, I was pretty much sick of corporate America, and I was engaged at the time. And I enjoyed the company. I just didn't like the restrictions of being where I was, and I thought I could do more and have more for myself, And so I decided to get my real estate license because at the time, the guy who was my mentor in real estate for that time for the next probably 8 or 9 years was doing really well. The real estate market was starting to take off pretty significantly because we had just, the war was over, the recession was over. Essentially, things had gotten better with the economy in the country. And so, the real estate market took off. And so I went and got my real estate license. And it was interesting because I didn't really like the phone for a long time. I had serious, fear of the phone, which, ties into what I'm doing now. But I ended up selling 72 houses my first 14 months in the business, and things took off. And so the guy that I was working with wanted to build his franchise. And so I ended up becoming sales manager and director of training for him and helped him build it to a little over 430 houses a year. So we ended up being number 3 in the world for Coldwell Banker for 3 or 4 years in a row. So it's really good. And so I got excited about that. But I really felt like there was something different there for me. So, I started coaching agents in 2001 that were on the team. And in 2006, I started doing real estate coaching full time. So I've kind of been helping real estate agents grow their business for the last 20 years. So it's been fun.
And what makes a good real estate agent? What do you need to coach on? You mentioned the phone, which is interesting. I don't necessarily think of the phone as a critical tool for a real estate agent, but I'm sure it must be.
It is the most critical tool for somebody, especially when they get started. Real estate.
So?
Well, real estate's an interesting industry. I mean, you get your license, you have no houses to sell, and you have nobody to sell them to. The only what's the word I'm looking for here? Asset, for lack of a better word, is your time. The only that's all you have is your time, and it's how you use that time. And so when you get started in the real estate industry, you've got to build your business. You've got to start prospecting, calling people you know, calling people you don't know, working on strategies to get in front of people so you can build a pipeline of people to start selling houses to. So that usually happens on the phone. And then even later on in the business, as you're generating leads online and you have other sources coming in, I mean, you can have a great funnel online or have a great marketing strategy in place, but even when they get to your front door, you're still going to specifically call them to get them to come in the front door so they can work with you and then give them a reason to work with you. So it plays a big part in it, if that matters. If that makes sense, right?
Yeah, sure. So,
but what makes a good real estate agent? Well, the number one thing, believe it or not, that I've learned is that you have to be willing to take action. You have to be an implementer, because there are certain things you need to do in a certain order to get the results that you want. And if you're not willing to take action, if you're not, if you stall or you procrastinate and don't do the things you need to do, I mean, that's why I think I think the statistic is about 88% of the real estate agents out there never make it to their first license renewal, which is 2 years later. Because I don't think people realize, how hard it is to figure out what to do your time, how hard it is to figure out what to do with your time, what to do, when to do it, where to do it, how to do it. And then a lot of folks do not want to pick up the phone and prospect and build relationships with people. So, over and above being a good implementer, you've got to be coachable. You've got to be willing to learn. Real estate is interesting in that it's kind of a peculiar industry from the standpoint that, there's a lot of tribal training that goes on. You're familiar with tribal training?
No.
So, tribal training is where, there's young children born into tribes, and then, they follow around either the leaders of the tribe or their parents based on what they do. So let's just say, the women are in charge of, and I'm not being, misogynistic or sexist here. I'm just saying, let's just say the women are in charge of cooking the food and whatnot in childcare, and then the men are in charge of hunting and going and getting the food. So the little boys will follow the men, learn how to hunt, learn how to make instruments weapons, and the girls will learn how to cook and how to take care of the house. So in real estate, for the longest time, and it still happens today, when you get into the business, you usually learn from the people that bring you into the business, and so you follow their methodologies and strategies. The only problem is a lot of those methodologies and strategies are outdated and not effective. And so from that standpoint, you're learning things that either don't work well or are not going to work well at all. So,
and then back to advertising, there's you're building your own personal brand, right? Because it's not like you can convince somebody to enter into the market when they're not ready to be in the market, either to sell or buy a house. But when that decision to enter the market happens, you need to be the first person they think of, right? I mean, insurance, people aren't looking for insurance all the time, but Geico spends $1 billion on advertising because when they are ready, they think Geico right away. It's got to be the same thing a little bit in building your own brand, right?
100% top of mind is important, so, but the interesting thing is, and I think a lot of people have the misconception that saying I'm number one, like if you go back and look at old real estate ads from 70s, 80s, 90s, even sometimes today, I'm number one, I'm the number one agent of this, I'm number one this, I do, I'm saying, everybody's the number one of something, but the fact of the matter is that you really have to be the number one in solving people's problems. You have to be able to solve the problem people have. So building your brand is not just letting people see your mug and letting them know you're a real estate, you can help them. Building your brand is educating people and helping them understand that they've got a problem that you solve it better than anybody else. Right? Either, I'm going to save you more money than somebody else. I'm going to get your home sold for more money. I'm going to get your home sold faster. You're going to have no headaches with me.
Right.
Or even unique selling propositions like your home sold guaranteed, or I'll buy it, or I'll save you $10,000 on a home, or I'll pay your closing costs, or something that really, gives people a reason to perk up and go, oh, that seems interesting, And so what comes as part and parcel of that, especially and thankfully for the internet now, is in social media, you can do all that for literally no money. Any good real estate agent has a camera on their phone, and they either use their camera on their phone or they use some sort of a special device that allows them to walk around and turn their camera around while they're walking and stuff like that. And so, it's about education, testimonials, problem solving, market updates. I mean, you're establishing your credibility and authority with people through video, and then any other things you can share where other people sing your praises as well. And so, the more you do that, the more effectively you do that, the more people get to know you, the better off you'll be. Strangely, not so strangely enough, especially for those people that follow social media. I mean, you want people to get you to know you so well that you're also going to involve them in your personal life as well. There's agents out there that position themselves as the fit agent, or the triathlon agent, or the $1 million agent, or what I'm saying, like, because, right? I mean, you read a lot. Have you read a lot? Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah. I'm a Hamilton grad. I guess I should be, right?
For the purposes of this conversation, you're an avid reader, voracious reader. But there's a book by Robert Cialdini called "Influence: The Power of Persuasion."
Okay.
He's identified that there's 6 main ways that we influence people, but one of those ways is through like or liking, meaning people want to do business with those that they like,
sure,
they think are alike of them, they're liking. So you want to do things.
Interesting.
Where you want to do things where people line up with who you are. You're like Tom's shoes, right? Remember Tom's shoes there?
Yep.
They give away a pair of shoes for a pair of shoes that's bought, right?
Yep.
So for people that like their shoes and are also civic minded, I'm going to align myself with that company, right? So, and that's kind of why it works so well for people to be on social media as real estate agents, not just to educate and help people and to help grow their brand, but also from the standpoint of, hey, get to know me and see the kind of person I am, and see how I dress, and see how I talk, and see the food that I eat, and see the things that I do, and then connect with me that way.
Yeah. You mentioned the internet as a tool that can help an agent be successful, but does it also make it more of a pain in the ass for you now that every prospective buyer or seller thinks they're an expert because they went on Zillow and looked up their Zestimate and think they know what's on the market and what the comps are?
Yeah, in short, yes.
Yeah.
Funny story though, I was looking at the other day because I was just looking, because I try to stay on top of everything that's going in the market as I have clients and I've got to give advice to them. But I think this last 2 years is the first time that the Zestimate was actually lower than what the house was on the market for. Like the Zestimate used to be out of control. Like I couldn't believe it for the price they would, and now they're all lower than the prices that the people have listed at. So that just kind of gives you an idea of the sign of the times. So
interesting.
But the funny thing is you saw these stories, you're never going to buy another house, a car, a boat, or anything from a salesperson. You're not going to ever go into a showroom. You're going to buy everything online. And, certain companies have done that. And certain industries have been totally disrupted by that, right? Legal aid, legal advice, insurance, like you mentioned earlier, the travel industry. The internet pretty much destroyed their brick and mortar presence, and so, but fact of the matter is things like houses are still huge enough investments where you need, a salesperson. And you need a lot of guidance and you need some help. Now, look, are there people out there that have bought a house sight unseen online? Yep. The thing is yes, people getting online and having access to estimates and articles and information and being able to look at Realtor.com and Zillow.com and Trulia, Redfin, Yahoo Real Estate, all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of information out there, but it doesn't make them any more effective at making the transaction go smoothly and getting the results they want.
Right.
Right. And in a way, it actually gives them a false sense of security. Right. You ever heard the statement somebody said, I know just enough to be dangerous.
Sure.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Not that there aren't, extremely intelligent, well-educated consumers out there, but the information online is not enough to give somebody the ammo that they would need to go and execute a real estate transaction in such a way that they would not avoid every legal requirement that was there and protect themselves and walk away with the best deal long term.
Yeah, and as informed as you are, I would imagine the average real estate buyer and home buyer doesn't realize how emotional that process can be and how hard that process can be. And to your point, having the best transactions I've had in buying and selling homes was when I had a great agent who could walk you through the process, knew the local ordinances and knew what to look for in a certain type of house and what typically goes wrong in a type of house. And you can think you're well informed, but boy, you start getting into that and you start thinking about the money you're plunking down. You lose sight. You take your eye off the ball real fast if you don't have the right person with you.
Because it is fraught with such emotion. Yeah, it's a good point. Same thing on the seller side too.
Sure.
the average for sale by owner leaves somewhere between 13 to 15% of their equity on the home because they can't negotiate on their own behalf.
Mm-hmm.
Really, the biggest problem, I mean, the largest number of lawsuits in any real estate department in the country has to do with disclosures. Each side
Right.
not disclosing things properly,
Right.
and then and I think to your point, everybody gets caught up in I got to get a house at a good price, and I got to fall in love with this house. Nobody's thinking about 3 years down the line when you go down and there's a huge crack in your foundation. And you're like, wait a second. That's why having a good agent helps, because you avoid all those down the line problems that can cost you tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees.
Right. So, what made you want to make the jump into coaching or get more involved in coaching agents?
Well, it's funny. My family used to teach me. My extended family used to tease me and say, "Oh, you're going to be a teacher when you get older. You're going to be a teacher." And I'm like, teachers don't make enough money. I'm sorry. I'm saying? My mom was a great teacher. She made really good money towards the end of her career, but it took her, 43 years. And I just, I had bigger dreams for myself. And so, when I got into coaching, it was exciting to see how I could help people improve their skill set and get better and improve the quality of their lives. I really enjoy public speaking, and it gave me an opportunity to get in front of groups of people to speak and do training. And it just gave me an overall better sense of satisfaction. And for what it's worth, I just selling houses wasn't a huge challenge for me anymore. I didn't get as much juice out of it, so to speak. So, I transitioned to coaching full time in 2006, and I've pretty much been doing it full time since 2006.
Wow. And what are the common challenges or things that people come to you needing help with?
It's interesting. People show up almost always at the same time. There's somewhere between like 25 sales a year and 40 sales a year. The majority of them, not all of them, but most of them come to us at that point because they feel like they've done everything they could do themselves and they want to take their business to the next level.
And what is that? And help me give perspective, that sort of range of sales per year. Where does that put an agent in terms of
the average
relative size?
If you go to NAR, the average real estate agent from NAR, the average realtor from NAR's perspective, I think last year sold a little over 12 homes and made just a little over $48,000 in income.
Wow.
However, there's 1.51 million realtors in the country, but there are 2 million real estate agents in the country. And I think the average real estate agent sells just under 6 houses a year.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So that takes into consideration part-time people who have an agent, just use it, pass sparingly. But, for serious folks, it's probably somewhere between 6 and 8 homes a year. So if you're doing 25 to 40 homes, you've built a business for yourself.
So these are successful people coming to you looking to supercharge into the, okay.
You figure what the average home price in the country now is a little over $300,000, Let's just say they make 10 grand a deal. That's $250,000 to $400,000 of revenue. They're not keeping all of it, but
right.
It's okay. They're not going to keep all that, but still, they've got some decent money coming in the door, but they don't have a lot of time because their business runs them. They don't really have a lot of systems in place. So they're continually having to monitor everything and babysit it. They don't have as much time for their family. They want to get to the next level where they can start stepping out of their business because, having sold coaching for the last 15 years, the number one thing I hear real estate agents say to me is that they want to become the true CEO of their business, and so meaning if they want to get paid whether they show up or not. Mm-hmm. That's not everybody. Some folks, we got some very successful real estate agents that, are in the Hamilton community. I'm saying Lisa DeLacy Reed and Kathleen McDonough, they're doing very well in their real estate markets. And, they love what they do from what I understand. But, a lot of agents are in a situation where they want to get out. They want to build a business they can step away from. And so they come to me or to other people so that we can give them the systems, the strategies, the programs, the tips to, systematize their business and then teach them how to slowly step out of it so that once they step out of it, they can step out of it and not have to go back into it and then have it run like a business. So that's pretty much what I've been focusing on for most of my career.
Interesting. And I know that you mentioned the phone before, and I've seen that that's been an area of focus for you. That I assume that's a little bit more for someone on the lower end of that range you're talking about, or you say no, that's a skill that you're always honing.
It is. It's funny you say that too. I actually, what kind of sparked my desire to create Phone Sales Secrets, which is the company I have now, in addition to coaching, is that I had a coaching client a while back, and he was doing well. he's a full-time firefighter, wants to become a full-time real estate agent. He did well for himself. I think he had sold 33 houses the year before, 28 houses the year before, but had one child, was planning on having another one, wanted better quality of life. Fire department worked well for me. He's been doing it for 20 plus years, but he wants to be out of it and have more control over his destiny, his finances and whatnot. And so he hired me as a coach and we started working. And so, normally I spend the first month or two helping them figure out what their plan is going to be, help me understand their business so I can make good recommendations to them. And then I'm like, okay, well, here's the plan. Said it's time to get on the phone and start prospecting so you can get more business. And he says, I can't do that. I go, what do you mean you can't do that? He's like, well, I don't like the phone. I said, you don't have to like the phone. You just got to like the people on the other end of the phone. That's all. I want to get them to like you. And he just couldn't do it. And so it's like, okay. And so, I've had this challenge with people for, the last 2 decades. People would hire me, want to grow their business. And I'd say, okay, well, you've got to prospect and you've got to start getting the phone to build more business, until you can pay somebody else to do it for you. Right. So, which means you're going to have to swing about, $5,000-$6,000 a month between salary bonuses and commissions on average. And so he's like, and I'm like, okay, well, I got to figure out a way to solve this problem. So I started taking a look at a lot of the things I had read and done. And, I took a lot of stuff from my own life because I actually suffered from sales call reluctance for 10 years, from 1988 to 1990 when I got my license. And so I looked through what I went through. I looked through what I was currently going through, counselors I'd worked with, therapists, coach I'm currently working with. And I said, okay, well, let's do this. And I just started saying, okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do this. And so Rick Carson has a great book called Taming Your Gremlin. It's all about, identifying that the source of the angst or whatever it is that comes from that voice that tells you not to move forward, not to make changes, not to do a better job, let's just stay where we are, And so I had him read that and we started working on it. And then I kind of took him through a process, and 45 days later, he calls me and says, I just got a $500,000 listing. I go, where'd you get that? And he goes, I was prospecting. I go, really? He goes, yeah. I go, okay. I didn't realize you were going to start prospecting so soon. He says, yeah, I just decided to start doing it. So I think he's ended up getting like a $1.2 million worth of business from this one person from that one phone call.
Wow.
And the interesting thing is that I remember the conversation I had with him. I said, well, wait a second. I said, so what you're saying is you walk in and out of burning buildings more than once to go, fight a fire. You'll carry people on your shoulder down a flight of fiery stairs. You told me you save people's lives on the sidewalk in front of a building, but you can't pick up, a 10-ounce piece of plastic. He says, no. And so he says, and so we talked about that. And
what is that? When you said you had it, he had it as a true hero. What's the reluctance? Is it fear of rejection? Is it fear of bothering people? Right. What drives that reluctance?
So it's interesting. We were talking earlier about people's identities as, and what people connect with outwardly with us, right? I'm saying they connect based on clothing, on, whatever. I mean, we have an identity. You're an athlete, you're a smoker, you're a drinker, you're a successful person, you're a preppy, whatever it is. So, but we also create these hidden identities and beliefs about ourselves, what we can and can't do, what we should and shouldn't do, what we're capable of. And so a lot of times people face challenges when they're kids, traumas, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, parents who are, not very supportive, maybe one day you're sitting there and you're like, Dad, I want to go to advertising in New York City. He's like, whoa, wait a second. He goes, listen here. He says, nothing good happens to the Boulder family ever. Okay. Nothing good has ever happened to our family. Don't stick your neck out. Nothing good's going to happen for you. Don't take any chances. Go get a job, get married, have kids. And so, you get programmed to not take chances and fear. What comes is that. So we create these hidden identities, and then we kind of water and sow them as we get older. And they start as little plants. And by the time we're adults, they become sequoia trees and they become this huge block. And so whatever the cause of it was, creates, like you said, fear of rejection, fear of not being liked, fear of not liking somebody else, fear of hurting your feelings, fear of hurting somebody else's feelings, anxiety. I'm saying all things that have to do with not wanting to put yourself in a situation where you can experience emotional pain.
Yeah.
And so people will, avoid picking up the phone like the plague because of the emotions that it invokes based upon how they feel about who they are inside. And, wow. You asked earlier, like, is the phone a big issue only when you begin? No, the phone's a big issue because these are salespeople for the rest of their lives. They're always going to talk to people on the phone. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a rare real estate agent out there that has a big enough sphere where they can get enough business from the people that they know. Mm-hmm. To do that. And most of the agents who've been in long enough now, the business is big enough where they can get most of their business from past clients in Sphere, and then they pay other people to make calls for them. But until you can afford to do that, you got to do it yourself. And the statistic is it's 40% of existing salespeople are seasoned salespeople, and 80% of new salespeople experience some sort of sales call reluctance. So it's pretty pervasive in a lot of sales industries, or industries where sales are required.
Sure. I mean, throughout my career in advertising as an ad buyer, sat on the other end of those many sales pitches from ad sales reps. And there's a lot of people who aren't good at it.
No, and not only with that, and part of it was because they were afraid to pick up the phone,
Yeah.
And they were afraid what you were going to say, and they were afraid you were going to hang up on them and whatnot. And so, and the fact of the matter is, and I think you can speak from your own experience, is that the better somebody was, the more likely you were to talk to them.
Sure.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
The
more and the more normal, right? Just the more.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny. People hate, public speaking, I guess, is one of the biggest feared activities on the face of the planet. Right. Mm-hmm. People hate public speaking more than going to the doctor and other things. And it's interesting. They've done studies, and they say when somebody's kind of suffering or being anxious or not doing well up in the crowd, the people in the audience are actually empathizing with them and feeling equally uncomfortable themselves, because they don't want to see anybody. Most of us don't want to see somebody fail or be in a bad place. Same thing happens on the phone. When somebody's not good on the phone, they feel uncomfortable. You feel uncomfortable as well. But the difference is you just hang up, right? I'm saying, get up and walk out. So right. It's it definitely impacts your audience and the results you get for sure. So being able to overcome that, be more confident, be able to have a better conversation with somebody on the phone, not be attached to whether or not they buy from you or hang up on you, really makes a difference in how successful you can be over the long term.
Yeah. So you mentioned your own reluctance. Big football player, successful, playing on some successful teams. Sounds like you had real estate success early on. What was driving your reluctance?
Well, I didn't get my license until I was 30, remember? So I was 30 years old, so I started later on in life. I had a pretty messed up childhood. My parents, and I'm saying this now up front, I love my parents. They did the best they could, but there were things they just didn't know, back then, and just weren't able to do for us. But it's interesting. By the time I got to Hamilton, I already had a binge eating disorder, and I was addiction to pornography and sex by the time I had gotten there. By the time I was, time I had gotten to Hamilton College, I had already had those 3 addictions well in place. I had my dad was treated pretty poorly by his mother, very mean woman, and so he had really low self-esteem, and he really didn't get an example on how to be a father at the time either. He was a good dad overall, but when I was younger, 4 or 5, 3, 4, 5, 6, my punishment if I didn't behave, whether I behaved poorly or not, was to send me to bed without food. And so when you're that age, imagine what kind of fear that creates about you not, whether or not you're going to eat, and so I remember first day of first grade, I'll never forget this. I remember David Carradine, the Kung Fu, right? The Kung Fu lunchbox. I remember picking it out, and if you recall grade school, the kids used to come in with the box of milks, and everybody would get their milk, and you have your snack and everything. Yeah. Well, I got my milk, and then I ate my entire lunch because I was afraid I wasn't going to be able to eat. And so anyway, that just kind of, really grew inside of me, and it created a tremendous amount of dishonesty within me in a lot of places because, I started lying to my parents about things that I did because I didn't want to get in trouble. Because I didn't want to not eat. So that created what became later on in life a really bad integrity problem within me as well. And so when I was 10, I was sexually abused by another family member. And I, back then nobody said, hey, didn't talk about sexual abuse back in 1970s and late 60s. And so I just kept it to myself. And then I started looking at pornographic magazines from my father's top drawer when I was 11. And then, I moved, and there was a girl in my neighborhood, and I started having sex with her at the age of 12. Wow. And then I was bullied mercilessly through grade school. By the time I was 13 years old, I was already a mess. I had terrible self-esteem, and I, really was having a lot of trouble dealing with the emotions that were going through me, made a lot of bad choices, said things I didn't mean, was fairly dishonest at the time, and really was just very uncomfortable with who I was as a person, and really couldn't explain it to anybody, Nobody understood why Wally Bressler, at the time Walter Bressler, kept getting sent to the principal's office once a week, or why I spent, better parts of weeks with the counselor at school. I'm saying nobody could figure that out. They just thought I was a, bad kid. So, anyway, so, when I was at Hamilton, football was a great outlet for me. And, Coach Frank, Coach Davis, Coach 80 specifically, they were great men, great leaders.
Did people know about the challenges you were what we were going through?
Nobody knew until about a year ago.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep. In fact, early this year, I didn't tell anybody anything because I was embarrassed. I didn't want people were going to think of me. And so most of my life, I put on this like outgoing, gregarious, like fun to be around, joking guy. Not everybody enjoyed. I'm not everybody's cup of tea. Never have been, never will. But I really disguised it with trying to be this outgoing, friendly guy. But I
Yeah.
remember I suffered from a lot of depression and anxiety when I was at Hamilton that pretty much went untreated. And
Right.
unfortunately, I didn't say things that really turned people off, just because I didn't really have good boundaries and I didn't understand who I was. And so, yeah, I just pretty much hid it the whole time. So
Wow.
I was a DT my freshman year, which I thought was kind of funny, you know.
Huh.
So they give out the Distinguished 13 every year, or so
Uh-huh.
I was one of the DTs, and I was like, oh, okay, no problem. So obviously, I'm like thinking to myself, well, clearly I have these people fooled, you know,
And
because
did you knowingly feel that way, that you were fooling people?
I didn't say I think I was fooling people, but I did realize that they didn't really know who I was.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't actually saying, oh, I got one over on them, but
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I knew inside that they couldn't see it, and that's really all that mattered to me.
Wow. Well, thank you
So,
for
yeah,
sharing. I mean, that's a lot. My
pretty,
goodness.
pretty happy.
So you mentioned you started being open about a lot of this about a year ago. What drove the change and the willingness to become open and expose yourself like this?
Well, it's interesting. We talked a little earlier about a lot of these calls. People go here, and then there's like may not be a hockey stick growth, but it's definitely a precipitous, like, straight line up, maybe some bumps along the way. And I was kind
Yeah.
of like, I got out and I went down. You know what I'm saying? I just, I ended up, so I moved to Boston, worked in Boston for 8 years, and started being very bad with my money. That was the fourth one. I've been fighting an addiction to money. I was doing the math the other day. I think I've probably wasted about $4 million in my lifetime, just not feeling comfortable with money. And because I convinced myself when I was younger I was poor and that I didn't deserve it, so I treated it like I didn't deserve it for a long time. And so, I was living in Boston, making good money and spending everything. I filed for bankruptcy. I was 24, just from being an idiot with my money. And
Wow.
so that was embarrassing. So, I got married in 1998, and married somebody I'd known for a while. We're divorced now. She's a very good friend of mine, but I was very unfaithful to her several times, and having an addiction to sex and pornography definitely didn't help that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we weren't good with our money together. We made a lot of bad choices. And then in 2005, I started doing some real estate investing, and there was a guy I knew from high school that we got connected with, and he and I started to do some real estate investing. And he was like, hey, there's these really flexible financing programs out, because that was like the end, just at the close to the end of the mortgage meltdown. I mean, close to the beginning of the end for the good
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And the mortgage meltdown was about to start in a couple of years. And so we were helping people buy property. We were buying people's properties and selling them back to them later on, 2 years later, helping them get their credit better. And we had buyers who were buying the houses. And, the fact of the matter is that he was lying on all the mortgage applications. So
Wow.
we ended up submitting about $15 million worth of fraudulent mortgage applications. And so, he assured me everything was okay. There were things that I saw that I ignored. There were things that I saw that I should have asked questions about, and I didn't. So that's my fault. And so I ended up spending a year in federal prison for mail fraud. So,
My goodness.
yeah, yep. So trying to think here. I was 13. So I children oldest was 13, 12, 9, and 7 were the age of my kids. So, and my ex-wife was mad at me, so she did not bring them to see me. So I didn't see my kids for a year. I thought I'd worked on a lot of things when I got to prison. When I came home, everything came back right away, So I gained back the 138 pounds. I learned. I gained in prison over time. I was divorced. I got my divorce notification on Valentine's Day of 2014. So that was that was how fitting was that, right? So and then I ended up going right back out and having bad relationships with the wrong people, and then I was speaking at a conference in 2015, and I met somebody, and we started dating, and it was a hugely toxic relationship. And I am getting to the answer to your question, by the way. So, but it was a hugely toxic relationship, and it just was bad. But I stayed with her for 4.5 years because I really wanted to have a good relationship. And I remember I was we were down at UT for a game to watch Herb coach against LSU as their opener game. Coach Eddie was there with his wife Bonnie, and who else was down there? Bobby D'Orazio, John Bolton. A lot of Hamilton guys were there. And so we were there and hanging out, and I found out right then and there because I was talking to my ex-fiance's sister, and she let me know that that woman was married the entire time we were together. So for 4.5 years, and she lived in another state, so I had no idea. So
Wow.
that really sent me for a loop. And then that woman tried to ruin my life, like stalked me, called clients, told them I was a convicted felon, like literally tried to destroy me. And so after about a year plus of legal fees and stuff like that, I finally got her to get rid of me. And then in October of 2019, I remember I was sitting at this like low leather chair in my house, and I was sitting, it was nighttime, I was looking out that like a French door on my at the back of my place, and I could see the light in the garage, and I started thinking about how I could kill myself because I really was, I thought going to prison was the low part. That was just, that was like 2 floors up. And so, and I was thinking about all the ways I could kill myself. And I was like, wait a second, like you have 4 children, you can't do that. And really having lost my father at a young age, I was 23, but my sister was 19. He died the year after I graduated from Hamilton. I didn't mention that, but I was 23. My sister was 19. My brother was 17. And I just like, I want my kids to feel the way that I felt about that. So
Right.
the only thing that kept me from doing that, killing myself, was I had 4 children who I did not want to go through the pain that I was going through. So, and shortly thereafter, I started doing research on how to find I started to go see a psychiatrist, and it didn't really work out well. And then I found a therapist in the late spring of 2020, and started working with her. And for the first time in my life, I was actually able to connect with somebody. But I remember we'd have all these sessions, and I would keep worrying about people would think about it if they knew that I was a convicted felon, or that I had been sexually abused, or that I had lied, or that I had stolen money, or, I'm saying all these terrible, horrible things that I did in my life, because I'm not a victim. I'm saying I don't want you to think I'm a victim. I don't know if you can take that soundbite and move it to the front, but I'm not a victim. I don't think I'm a victim at all. I mean, there were things that happened to me, but I was the genesis for a lot of the things that happened in my life. The bad choices that I made. I've hurt a lot of people, made a lot of bad choices. All 4 of my kids have had a super hard time. They're doing a lot better now, but it's on me. But I lived in fear every day that somebody was going to find out something that was going to basically make them not like me. So one day I just made the decision to just tell everything. And so I went on Facebook and on my social media and told the whole story.
Wow.
Because when you tell people everything that could possibly hurt you, that takes the power away from that. And so that's why I'm able to sit here and have this conversation with you today, because, and one of the most embarrassing things is graduating from Hamilton College, one of the best colleges in the country, and looking at all the success all of your friends were having, and looking at all the success you should have had, and realizing that you have failed miserably compared to everybody else, and how embarrassing it is. I'm saying, when you're calling and talking to people who are, doing extremely well, working great jobs in great companies, and, just, I'm not unhappy for them. I'm super happy for them. I was glad for them. I wanted good things to happen for them. But just, in my mind, the embarrassment of just falling so short compared to what other people had done, realizing how much money I had wasted and how many relationships I had screwed up and all that stuff. And so, that was hard too. That was really one of the more painful things is, all the people I went to school with. So that was, and anyway, so I just, to answer your question, I just decided that I couldn't carry the weight anymore, Dave. I just could not get to the point where I could carry it. I mean, literally I was sitting here on my couch like I am now. And I was like, you know what? I just got to do it. So I just got on and I started telling the story.
Well, good for you. And clearly, it seems to put you in a much better place. I'm 100%. Curious as I hear you tell your story and think about, you at Hamilton, realizing people don't know really what you have going on and who the real you is, right? And then you talk about working in real estate, and I imagine it's the same in coaching, connecting with people on a personal level. That fear, I'm sure, again, of letting out who you really are and sort of what you're struggling with. Now that you're doing that, we mentioned at the beginning, you're on an upswing. So not only is it making good for you and your own mental health, but it seems to be good for business as well, being honest.
Yeah, unintentionally. I'm saying? I wasn't like, I'm going to go live the worst life I can live and tell the story so that I can.
Well, no, but just the honesty is good for business.
Yeah. There's something very cathartic about being, having integrity at every level of your life, if that makes sense.
Sure.
There were years where I had to think about what I was going to say to people because I wasn't sure what I had told them before. Wow. I lied. I would lie. It would be a perfunctory activity for me. It was just, and not even to be malicious, just out of embarrassment and, fear of being judged, and so
Uh-huh.
yeah. So anyway, so so anyway, after my client had good results, I'm like, I'd like to do this again. And then I did it again, and then I did it again. And then I'm like, well, I can do something there. So I created a business around it. And now I 10 at a time, I help people overcome sales call reluctance. And what they realize is the reluctance has nothing to do with sales and phone. It has everything to do with who they are. So not only are they able to get on the phone and make calls and sell things, but they're also living a better quality of life. They're happier, they're healthier, their relationships are better. They're not sitting in sadness all day long. I have people that are like, hey, and I thought of something I wanted to do 20 years ago. Things are coming back to me that I had goals for 20 years ago that are not back in my head. So
Yeah.
people of all ages, 23, 70 years old. I mean, it's been amazing. It's like been a true blessing, And so, and part of what allows me to do that is not only be able to identify them because I've gone through a lot of what they've done, but I can also give them the actual steps on how to get over it because I did it myself.
Mm.
So that's been huge. And so anyway, I have, I really want to get my message out because I really want to help a lot of people. There's a lot of folks out there. And I have my own blog and my own podcast, and I've been getting on other people's podcasts. And they're like, "Do you think you could talk to our people?" So it's starting to take root. So I hired a company last week to help me write my book. I've been trying to write a book for forever, just haven't had time. And for a while, I didn't believe in myself to do it. So I've hired somebody to help me write a book. I'm still working on the title, but I'm sure I will let Hamilton know when it's done. And then I have a company who's helping me get a TED Talk right now. So TEDx Talk. So
awesome.
Yep. So I can share with people
to tell your story.
Not, yes, to tell my story, but also to, because, it's going to be about overcoming self-sabotage and then reprogramming the way that we dream. And when I say dream, like dream, not sleep, not dream during, sleep, but dream like how we think about what's available to us and what we can accomplish for ourselves. Because one of the things I dealt with, it was interesting. I had my son who was 17 join me in my business. I said, hey, come work with me. So he does some stuff for me. And, I said, let's set some goals. And he says, okay. I said, what do you want to do? Let's find 10 things you want to do, where you want to go. And we sat there for an hour and he couldn't come up with one thing. Not one thing that he wanted to do. Not a thing. And at the time I didn't realize it. And I'm like, okay, well, I started prompting him and he said, yeah. So, and it's interesting as I started working with people and talking to them, what I realized is that, when we're so caught up in the pain that we're feeling and all the things we're running from and we're trying to avoid, and our mind is so clouded with pain and sadness and hurt, and all we're figuring out is a way to avoid that pain, there's really no room for us to, number one, for us to think about what great things would be like for us in the future. And also for our self-worth and our self-esteem and self-belief is so low, we don't even believe that we're worth it. So we're not even going to think about it. Mm-hmm. And so, because my son's life had been so negatively impacted by what happened, he was still in a point where he was unable to see those things. So I'm, another great thing about this is, people start to feel good about the future and where they want to go and start having dreams again. That's why I've gotten to the, reprogramming how we dream part of it. So
and what's your, and where are you at on that? What are your dreams as you look towards the future?
Well, my biggest dream is that, my children all have well-adjusted relationships with people that they love and respect, and vice versa. That they all not only have money to do what they want to do, but that they're smart around their money and do the things that they are able to do in their life, because I not only provided them with money, but also showed them how to manage it properly and take care of it, and understand that, we use money, that money doesn't use us. I'm one of my dream is that they all grow up well-adjusted adults, realizing that they don't need anyone or anything to make them feel valued or important, that they don't need anybody's approval or acceptance, that they are good enough just the way that they are, as they are, where they stand. Like those are my big dreams, is to make sure that my kids don't live the life that I lived and don't live the adult life that I'm 53 and I'm really like just coming to peace, making peace with all this stuff, the last 2 years, what I'm saying? So, I don't want them to go through 45 years of, misery.
And break the chain, right? You talked about, some of the challenges from your parents onto you. Yep. And it's such a common theme in many adults' lives of what happened from their parents who didn't know any better, right?
Period, right? Breaking the cycle, they call it. Good point.
That's right.
But
yeah.
Over and above that, I mean, for myself, I want to be able to, live a life that I've created for myself and do some fun things. I haven't done a lot of fun things, so I want to really do some fun things. And I also want to change other people's lives. I want to go and meet with people. And I enjoy when, people call me or send me a text message or a video and say, hey, you changed my life. This is great. Some, one of my dreams is to is to go speak professionally in front of large groups of people and share my story, and then inspire them to go ahead and go out and create a great life for themselves and work at overcoming the things that have been plaguing them and not let them plague them for one more second. So, and part of that is writing a book and speaking, and then kind of building the business that I have now. So I would say those are probably top of mind at the moment. That could change, but right now, the big thing is making sure that my kids are in a really great place and are well-adjusted adults who feel good about themselves and feel happy for their future. That's the big thing for me.
And you feeling good about where they are on that path now?
Yeah, it wasn't easy. I mean, it was tough. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I got home in 2014, and they've probably been, maybe the last 2 or 3 years has been where they've really started to blossom and flow. And, interestingly enough, it's interesting having conversations with them, and, please don't go out and do anything stupid, anybody to do this. But my kids are some pretty resilient people, and they're pretty resourceful people. You know what I'm saying? And so part of that is having to overcome what they came through. You know what I'm saying? So they're more mature than a lot of the kids their age, and they make some better decisions than other kids their age, but only because, they had the screws put to them and made a lot of bad choices earlier on because of me. So
right.
If that makes any sense,
No, it does. It does.
So.
Well, I'm happy for you and proud that you've made the decisions you've made to be where you are. And you mentioned the trajectory, and I can feel it, and I can sense it in hearing your talk. And
thank you.
I appreciate your honesty. I always ask people if there's anything they wish they had known when they stepped foot on campus for the first time, and I feel like you could go. There'd be a million things you would say.
What we could do, I wish I had known part 2. I wish I'd known part 3, part 4. Yeah, there were a lot of things. Awesome.
Well, I hope you, when the TED Talk happens, I want to see it. When the book comes out, I look forward to it, and I want you to come back and talk to me about it.
I appreciate that.
All right, that's Wally Bressler, class of 1990. Like I said at the beginning, I didn't know much about Wally before we got into the chat, but I did not expect him to be as open and honest as he was, and I'm thankful he did. I'm thankful he shared that. There's certainly something to second chances in life. It sounds like Wally's taking full advantage of a second chance. And good for him. Wish him nothing but luck and success. And a big thank you to him for joining this week. You have been listening to Had I Known at WHCL-FM, Clinton, New York. HadIKnown.buzzsprout.com. Had I Known Show on social media. As always, my thanks to Dr. Michael Woods for supplying the music on the show. And, once again, Doc is going to play us out. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll talk to you next week.
Had I Known podcast show on your radio or take it to go.